Coming in at number 5, we've got It Chapter 2. We are flying out of the gate with this one. Keegan, what are you talking about? It Chapter 2 needs a rewatch. It made like $500 million at the box office. It was the biggest horror movie of that year. It rounded out the story we all waited for years. And all of that, I say yes, these things are true. But here's the deal. It Chapter 2 was a bit of a disappointment. After the rip-roaring good time that was Chapter 1, I went in with high hopes. Hell, they even shot part of the baseball scene in my hometown, which is a fun little tidbit I like to throw around from time to time. I wanted to like this movie. It had all sorts of awesome stuff going for it. They were set up for success, and in the end, the financial success was there. The proliferation of the legend of Pennywise was there, but the overall satisfaction was not. Was it because I went in with high hopes? Did I expect to blow Chapter 1 out of the water and possibly even live up to the book? Well, maybe not. Which means that revisiting it outside of the packed pre-COVID theater environment might actually reveal new things. Maybe going in with more balanced expectations for a rewatch will open my eyes to other things the movie did right. Maybe the pacing isn't as wonky as I remember, especially if I can watch it on my own time. But yeah, if you have any sort of strong opinion on It Chapter 2, whether that be positive or negative, it's time to give it a rewatch. It's no longer brand new, it's had some time to become less fresh in our memories. And now, with well-worn objective eyes, we can figure out how we really feel about the latest incarnation of Stephen King's classic clown story. Well, get to it. Tell me what you think of this one. Coming in at number 4, we've got Event Horizon. Time has been quite good to Event Horizon. As highly ambitious movies tend to do, this one underperformed at the box office. Upsetting, but not too surprising. A lot of folks blame studio interference for Event Horizon's lackluster release, with a lot of the movie being chopped out and changed because it was too weird, and also because of some time restraints. Fun fact, the editing of this flick was rushed after Titanic missed some key production deadlines. Paramount figured this was probably less valuable than the soon-to-be legendary nautical romance. I mean, fair, but it kinda sucks that it turned out that way. Originally clocking in at around 130 minutes, Paul Anderson's vision was chopped way down. So at the time, it didn't make all that much sense to people. When you tell the story of a spaceship with an experimental engine possessed by a malevolent force, you want those details. It did quite well when it released on home video, however, leading to Anderson getting the opportunity to piece together a director's cut of sorts. Unfortunately, by that point, a lot of the original footage was lost or destroyed, which made it quite difficult to complete. Still though, Event Horizon has garnered quite the following in the years after its release. In fact, it's referenced quite often in all sorts of media that came after it. So if it's been a while since you saw Event Horizon, maybe give it another chance. Do a little reading on it, maybe watch a history of video and then hop in with some new perspective. Even though the movie itself hasn't changed much since release, the experience seems to have altered itself quite a bit. Coming in at number 3, we've got Paranormal Activity, the original. Every once in a while, a movie comes along and defines the next few years of horror. Not all horror that follows will try to emulate it, but a lot of stuff will try to cash in on the premise. And if you're lucky, you get a whole series with which to build lore that definitely didn't exist in the original. It happened with slashers and their iconic villains. It happened with self-aware horror in the 90s and early 2000s. It happened with the remaking of Japanese horror for American audiences. It happened with found footage, and it happened to Paranormal Activity too. This movie rocked everyone's world on a next to nothing budget. It was scary in all the right ways and really took advantage of its minimalist approach to maximize the scares. The story was lacking and the performances were mostly okay, but it didn't matter because Paranormal Activity was more than the sum of its parts. And then the sequels started coming. Because it was so cheap to make, they started pumping these out like water from a fire hydrant, and it was crazy how quickly they racked up Paranormal Activity follow-ups. Eventually, they did away with numbering altogether for the sequels and then tried to sell them as spin-offs and revivals and their own little thing. And with each sequel, the novelty lessened. And with the novelty going out the window, they weren't left with much. In fact, after a while, they got worse at implementing the kind of scares that made the first few such compelling watches. And now I can't imagine anyone being excited to hear about a new Paranormal Activity. It's done. It's over. I mean, probably. It's entirely possible that someone finds a wicked way to revive the series with a fresh injection of talent and creativity, but for now we wait. Although, going back and rewatching the movie that started it all is still on the table. It's been so long since the idea felt fresh, it's probably a whole lot of fun to revisit what got this train rolling in the first place. Forget all of the cheesy YouTubers attempting to trick their viewers into watching their own Paranormal Activity remakes. The best scares are the original ones. Some folks return to stuff like the Blair Witch Project and don't find it all that interesting. interesting, citing the historical significance as greater than the scare factor. But I think that Paranormal Activity, while not as influential overall, holds up quite well. Coming in at number 2, we've got Devil. I'd say anything involving M. Night Shyamalan is worth a rewatch for various reasons. Yes, even The Last Airbender. Bad movies can teach you just as much as good ones, and when you've got a director as wide-ranging as Shyamalan, there's always something interesting to be picked up from a watch. Oddly enough, this one wasn't screened for critics in advance. I don't know if they weren't confident in it, but it wasn't that bad of a flick. In fact, it's pretty decent. Devil was originally supposed to be part of a series of modern supernatural tales known as the Night Chronicles trilogy, but that never came to fruition. However, the tale of a group of strangers trapped in an elevator with one person being possibly possessed by the devil is a fun one. Some folks will say that the runtime's too short and the story's too basic, but in all honesty, those are the elements that really make it work. If it were any longer, it would drag, and who needs an overly complex story when your premise is so simple to begin with? Seriously, this was released when M. Night was peak meme, so folks heard his name and wrote it off. He's not even the director, he was just involved in creating it. But if you want a genuinely scary, fast-paced, and self-contained horror, take a look at Devil one more time. And coming in at number 1, we've got Suspiria 2018. Whenever somebody remakes a bona fide classic, it's gonna raise some eyebrows. Until recently, it didn't look like anyone would forgive Gus Van Sant for recreating Psycho the way he did. Like, most people still want him burned at the stake for that, but some people are attempting a Psycho remake apology tour. No comment. But when it was revealed that the director of Call Me By Your Name was taking a swing at the 1977 witch-filled cult classic, a lot of folks took issue. Some say you should just leave stuff alone, and others thought that it wouldn't be served correctly by this director whose career looked a whole lot different than Dario Argento's. But in the end, despite all of the controversy, the movie got made. And it was good! It was different than the original, but it still paid homage throughout. It lengthened the story in many ways, with a bunch of new elements being added, remaking certain iconic moments while shying away from others and even adding in some brand new incredible bits. It's definitely not for everyone, and it's not the ideal remake of Argento's horror mainstay, but who can decide what an ideal remake is anyway? But if you saw it when it came out and weren't quite sure about how you felt about it, there's no time like the present to go and cement your opinion. This is a densely packed, slow-moving movie, so a second watch will more than likely result in seeing details you might have missed on the first time. So put on your dancing shoes and see what you think.
Coming in at number 5, we have Event Horizon. I mean, of course, I couldn't possibly write about sci-fi horror movies without including one of the best of all time, Event Horizon. Released in 1997 and directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, Event Horizon stars the likes of Lawrence Fishburne, Sam Neill, Kathleen Quinlan, and Jolie Richardson, with the movie being set in 2047 and following a crew of astronauts who were sent on a rescue mission after Event Horizon, a mission spaceship, appears in orbit near Neptune. The crew learns pretty fast that the Event Horizon was a testbed for an experimental engine that ultimately opened a rift in the space-time continuum, which resulted in a malevolent entity possessing their ship. The movie is maddening from start to finish, with the crew discovering a portal to a terrifying dimension, one that we only get to see snippets of, but we know it's enough to drive the crew completely over the edge and wish to end their lives over returning. Now, while it did flop upon its initial release, Event Horizon has since developed a dedicated and very dedicated cult following, and has since been labeled as one of the best sci-fi horror movies in history, alongside the other greats coming up on our list. Not to mention the cast is truly fantastic, and no matter how many years pass, the movie just gets better and better with time. Before we jump into number 4, be sure to hit that like button, it really helps us out a lot. Coming in at number 4, we have Sunshine. Sunshine is a movie that I truly think we don't discuss enough, with this being one of the best sci-fi horror movies I've ever seen. We're sleeping on it, and that needs to change. Released in 2007 and directed by Danny Boyle, Sunshine stars the likes of Cillian Murphy, Chris Evans, Rose Byrne, and Benedict Wong, with the plot following a group of astronauts on a dangerous mission to reignite the dying sun in the year 2057. However, the crew soon begin to get pulled in by the distress calls of an earlier ship who was sent out on the same mission. Now, the crew could continue on their mission, or they could investigate the distress call, and ultimately they make the wrong call and find themselves heading towards danger. Not only are they deviating from their mission, but they must now fight for their own survival while also attempting to save humanity from the dying sun. Now it should be noted that Danny Boyle has credited movies such as Alien and Solaris as his big inspirations for Sunshine. However, while Sunshine doesn't outperform those films, it certainly comes close. Many critics and viewers alike have also noted the similarities between Sunshine and 2001: A Space Odyssey. However, despite all this, the movie was not considered a box office success despite being met with praise. Also, an interesting tidbit of information, director Danny Boyle had the actors live together and learn about topics related to their role as a form of method acting. Fun. Boring. Coming in at number 3, Aliens. Now it hurt me to put Aliens so far down on our list considering that it is my personal favourite film from the Alien franchise, which you all seem to find very upsetting in one of my previous lists. Released in 1986 and directed by James Cameron, Aliens is the sequel to the 1979 movie Alien, and stars Sigourney Weaver as Ellen Ripley, the sole survivor of an alien attack on her ship. However, this time around, when communications are lost with the human colony on the moon where her crew first encountered the alien creatures, Ripley must once again return to investigate, this time with a brand new crew of colonial marines. Now, this is a rare case of a sequel exceeding its predecessor. In my opinion, that is. I know many people disagree with me. However, Alien sets the bar incredibly high for sci-fi horror movies, with Ripley returning back to space and kicking ass and taking names. This time around there's far more action than horror in the movie, with it being a thrill ride from start to finish. Not to mention the xenomorph is an absolutely terrifying creature, with it making a reappearance in Aliens. It is also considered to be one of the deadliest alien species, requiring a host organism to reproduce, hence where humans come into play, with the aliens implanting embryos into various hosts. Now, it is very rare for a genre film to receive critical acclaim, but Aliens defied all odds, with Sigourney Weaver even nabbing herself an Oscar nomination in the process. Coming in at number 2, we have The Thing. Now, this was very close to being my number 1 pick, but I had to make the tough call, and unfortunately The Thing got pushed to number 2. Released in 1982 and directed by John Carpenter, The Thing stars the likes of Kurt Russell, A. Wilford Brimley, T.K. Carter, and Keith David, with it following a group of American researchers in Antarctica who encounter the Thing, an extraterrestrial life form that has the ability to assimilate and imitate other organisms. Due to this, the group becomes paranoid, with them no longer being able to trust one another, accusing one another perhaps being the Thing. From the off, The Thing is a frightening and suffocating movie, with the hostile Antarctica setting creating a sense of unease and claustrophobia. They are completely alone with no escape, no hope of rescue, not to mention a shape-shifting alien is on the loose and will do absolutely anything to secure its survival by mutating, taking on other forms, and killing everything in its path, whether it be a dog or a human. The movie so effectively evokes a sense of fear of the unknown, the fear that we will lose control of our own body and be taken over by an outside force. Not to mention, we as an audience don't even know who we can trust, because at the end of the day, any single one of the characters could be the Thing. To this day, The Thing is considered to be one of the best science fiction horror movies of all time, with it developing an intense and dedicated cult following over the years. And finally, in at number 1, we have Alien. Now, everyone will surely be breathing a sigh of relief that Alien made it to the number 1 spot, and not my favourite Aliens, which we discussed earlier. Released in 1979 and directed by Ridley Scott, Alien stars the likes of Sigourney Weaver, Tom Skerritt, John Hurt, and Ian Holm, with it following the crew of a commercial space tug, Nostromo, who encounter an aggressive and deadly alien which is set loose on their ship, resulting in some truly catastrophic and terrifying events. Sigourney Weaver as Ripley also quickly becomes the archetype of a female action heroine, with her being a woman most of us strive to be. No matter how much time passes by, Alien still has the ability to keep you on the edge of your seat, with the eponymous alien working its way through the crew through any means possible and making sure it will continue to thrive and reproduce. Now, it can be said that Ridley Scott set the standard for sci-fi horror movies, with many, particularly the ones we just listed, soon to follow. Many of the moments have been imitated throughout cinema, but ultimately, Alien was the one to start it all. The movie has become absolutely iconic over time, with the chest-bursting scene going down in history as one of the scariest moments in any horror movie. It's also a very rare case where almost every element of the movie is near perfect, and to top it off, the creature designed by H.R. Giger is incredible. As we know, the success of Alien spawned a franchise of movies including Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, Alien vs Predator, and everyone's least favourite, Prometheus, which I actually loved, but that's because I love Charlize Theron. come for me. Coming in at number 5, we have The Perfection. I absolutely loved The Perfection, and I probably watched it about 10 times, which I don't know what that says about me. Probably nothing good, considering this is one film. Released in 2018 and directed by Richard Shepard, The Perfection stars Allison Williams and Logan Browning, with it following Charlotte Wilmore, a talented cellist who was forced to leave the prestigious music school back off in order to care for her ill mother. However, after her mother's passing years later, Charlotte reaches out to the head of back off, Anton, and travels to Shanghai to join him. This is where everything quite literally descends into madness. It is here that Charlotte meets Lizzie, another cellist, and the two hit it off, sleeping together and then deciding to head on a trip together. However, when Lizzie gets sick and bugs begin to crawl out of her body, we wonder what exactly is going on. Is this an infection movie? Is this all in her mind? The movie quickly takes a sharp turn into something much darker, shocking all of us in the process. Who is the real villain? Can we trust anyone? What secrets is back off hiding? This movie keeps you well and truly on your toes, and like many on our list, it gets better and better with each watch. I highly suggest you check it out. Before we jump into number 4, make sure you give this video a big thumbs up, it really helps us out a lot. Coming in at number 4, we have Cam. Now, although this movie polarized critics, I personally think this film deserves a spot on our list, with the movie playing out like an extended episode of Black Mirror. Released in 2018 and directed by Daniel Goldhaber, Cam is a psychological horror that follows Alice, a cam girl who wakes up one day to discover that she's been replaced on her show by an exact replica of herself. This is a techno thriller, drawing from sci-fi elements and thriller elements, hence giving off those Black Mirror vibes. There's nothing quite as terrifying as knowing that a doppelganger has taken over your entire life and no one realizes. Plus, there's nothing you can do to stop them. Despite being a fantastic psychological horror, most people haven't even heard of this movie, and that's a damn shame because it's truly worth your time, and the performance by Madeline Brewer is truly superb. The movie went on to take home awards at the Brooklyn Horror Film Festival and the Fantasia International Film Festival, deservedly so. More interestingly still, the writer of Cam was a former cam girl herself, originally intending to create a documentary of sorts. However, she ultimately opted to take a horror approach, and she definitely succeeded in her efforts. Coming in at number 3, we have Gerald's Game. One of 2 entries directed by Mike Flanagan on our list, Gerald's Game was an unexpected and very disturbing surprise. Released in 2017, this psychological horror is based on the 1992 novel by Stephen King, which was long thought to be unfilmable. However, Flanagan definitely proved this to be incorrect. Starring Carla Gugino and Bruce Greenwood, the pair play a married couple who head to an isolated holiday home for the weekend. However, while trying to spice up their life in the bedroom, the husband has a heart attack, leaving his wife handcuffed to their bed without a key and with no hope of rescue. Now, this is a movie that gets better and better each and every time you watch it, with Carla Gugino delivering one hell of a performance. This is a rare case of a director coming back and hitting with an even better movie, and this also sees Gugino and Henry Thomas together, with them going on to star as husband and wife in Haunting of Hill House. Now, while trapped to the bed with no way to escape, the wife, Jessie, is forced to relive her past trauma while trying to find the inner strength to break free. She is trapped in a waking nightmare, unsure of what is real and what isn't. Is the midnight man who creeps into her room at night a figment of her imagination, or is he real? She must battle her fears and find a way to break free from her chains though, and the final act of this movie is one that will linger with you long after the credits roll. In at number 2, we have Apostle. This movie took me well and truly by surprise in the best way possible. I've only seen it once, and I think it's about time I checked it out again. Released in 2018 and directed by Gareth Evans, Apostle is a period horror starring Dan Stevens and Michael Sheen, with the story following a British man, Thomas, in 1905, who attempts to rescue his sister from an evil cult on a remote Welsh island. The movie very much pays homage to The Wicker Man, and it does this so well. Now, the cult on this island renders it fertile through blood sacrifices. However, after running out of resources to pay for continuous animal sacrifices, the land becomes barren. So if they can't have animal sacrifices, they're gonna have to have some human ones. Now, what may surprise some is that this is perhaps the craziest movie we have on our entire list. What begins with an homage to a classic horror movie quickly turns into an absolute gore fest halfway through, and that is because this movie is made by the man behind The Raid. And if you've seen The Raid, you will completely understand what I'm saying. Some moments took me completely by surprise, especially with the drastic shift in tone halfway through. This is definitely pushing the boundaries with what Netflix usually puts out, which is why it was so damn effective. No one sees it coming. Also, the ending of this movie has moments that divide many viewers, but these are the moments you certainly are not going to forget anytime soon. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Hush. I truly could talk about how much I love Hush all day, and I'm very much aware that I've discussed it countless times on this channel, but I truly believe this movie changed the game completely, and it is certainly what made people start uttering the name Mike Flanagan. Released in 2016 and directed by Flanagan, Hush stars his real-life wife Kate Siegel as Maddie, a deaf woman who lost her ability to hear and speak after contracting meningitis when she was young. She now lives an isolated life in the woods in hopes of writing another novel. However, her tranquil life is rudely interrupted when a masked man appears at her door, who quickly discovers that Maddie cannot hear him, giving him the advantage as he does everything possible to get inside of her home. However, Maddie in fact has an advantage that he doesn't realize. She is a storyteller with the ability to run through every scenario in her mind before it happens, and with one lost sense, her others have become heightened. She senses the danger, allowing her to have much faster reflexes. She isn't weak by any means, she is in fact prepared, and will do absolutely everything in her power to stay alive. This movie is a slasher, but unlike many other horrors we have seen in recent years, it is original, a brand new story that we haven't witnessed before on screen. It's isolating, thrilling, quiet, and haunting. It will have you on the edge of your seat as Maddie must rely on her sight to get her out of the perilous situation, while everything around her is completely silent, except for her mind, which is doing absolutely everything to find a way out of the situation. Now, for those who are familiar with The Haunting of Hill House, Kate Siegel of course plays Theo, with this being one of the first team-ups with her real-life husband Mike Flanagan, with her co-writing the script alongside him.
Coming in at number 5, we've got Crimson Peak. Now this is a period piece. This movie is the textbook definition of gorgeous. There's not a single frame in this flick that doesn't look absolutely incredible. It's Guillermo del Toro doing the most and killing it. Like, this movie doesn't even have to be scary. The set design and costumes are enough to keep folks invested from start to end. But of course, it being a GDT flick, Crimson Peak is jam-packed with ghosts, hidden intentions, murder, and a little something else. What that little something is, I'll leave to you to find out. But all of this would be less impressive if it wasn't also couched inside a wonderful rendition of an early 20th century English manor. There are all sorts of lovely era-specific details throughout the first act, but everything gets extra spicy once they enter Allerdale Hall. Crimson Peak, baby. Red clay and blood, there's nothing quite like it. Now, there are plenty of ghosts in this movie, but more than anything, it's a gothic romance. Even Del Toro says so. This quality adds to the historical intrigue, though. Being so set-oriented and polished is an homage to many of the movies GDT grew up watching. It's more along the lines of The Omen and The Shining than a lot of its other contemporaries. Big, polished horror is what you get from Crimson Peak, and it's hard to imagine it being done any other way. Coming in at number 4, we've got Bone Tomahawk. Moving away from polish and highbrow spookiness, let's talk about one of the most brutal and over-the-top movies ever to be set in the Wild West. It's an independent Western cannibal horror film starring Kurt Russell, and well, what could be better than that? It's always fun to do a genre mashup, you know? I feel like horror and westerns have their own little niches they fill in the genre landscape, and a lot of folks tend to get obsessed with either one or the other and end up in the infinite expanse of being a full-time genre fan. But it's not so often that the two are put together, so when it happens, it's exciting. Bone Tomahawk is a truly horrific western with all of the hallmarks of both slapped together so hard that they bleed profusely. There's a lot of blood and gore here. I would assume the same to be true about the actual Wild West back in the day, but a lot of the depictions of this are pretty sanitized, which seems a little disingenuous, but I suppose westerns were at their peak popularity before a lot of gnarly stuff was commonplace in movies. I'm getting off topic. The western and horror elements blend together beautifully. Russell is Sheriff Franklin Hunt, and he learns of a tribe of cannibals living out in the desert somewhere. Some people from his small town are abducted by these, to quote the movie, troglodytes, and the sheriff has to round up a posse and see what they can do about it. This, of course, leads to a whole lot of bloody violence. The movie is called Bone Tomahawk, for goodness sake, and there is some gristle in this movie. Legs are mangled, entrails are scooped out like ice cream, and infections run rampant, and that's just what life was like back then, I guess. Opium tinctures and whiskey if you want to deal with a wound. Also, go out and kill everyone that's causing trouble. Times sure have changed, eh? Maybe not. Either way, this is a fascinating genre-blending period piece with enough gore and debauchery to keep anyone entertained, or repulsed. Depends on the kind of person you are, I suppose. Coming in at number 3, we've got The Others. Let's take a trip back to the post-World War II era for a moment. Lots of tragedies around this time, and moving backwards to the turn of the century doesn't improve things all that much. Being alive was tough. Although being dead could be even tougher. Spoilers ahead for the next joke I'm gonna make. Or maybe you prefer to have the movie spoil? Even tougher if you don't know you're dead. Uh-oh. Yeah, so following the deadliest world war to date, a young family ends up dead. Not directly because of the war, but because their father died on the front, causing his wife to give into despair and end the whole family. Now they get to live as ghosts in a big old house full of other ghosts. Tuberculosis took the lives of all the house's staff in the late 19th century, leaving them to endlessly tend to the grounds as well. For most of the movie, however, the viewer doesn't know this. They see a gloomy family awaiting the return of their war-bound father, milling about their remote country house, rarely seeing anyone that doesn't live or work there. The children are sensitive to light, and the mother is prone to fits of hysteria along with seeing things that aren't actually there. Because these events seem to be happening back in the first half of the 20th century, one might assume that they are indeed quite ill, with little consequential medical help. Plus, the mother seemingly losing her mind thanks to the absence of her husband seems less out of place. When ghosts start appearing, things get really freaky, but are they ghosts? You probably already know the answer to this one. The whole thing is a reverse ghost story, with these phantoms believing they're still alive, attempting to deal with their unwanted visitors. However, the truth of the matter is that everyone living in the house died there years prior, and any new appearance is a real living human. What a twist, and what a look at post-war living. Coming in at number 2, we've got From Hell. This is a particularly interesting and valuable piece of historical fiction. See, the Hughes brothers, no relation, made a film called From Hell, and it's based on the graphic novel of the same title by Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell. It takes a look at the Jack the Ripper murders and hypothesizes about how they could have happened and who would have been involved. The killer's identity, motives, and more are investigated in depth with the graphic novel, with plenty of very thorough research going on. Educated guesses throughout many academic texts don't get much closer to a possible truth than this graphic novel. It's a fascinating read, right with historical details and insight. And while the movie doesn't translate everything perfectly from page to screen, it does a damn good job trying. We dive into the lives of 19th century prostitutes in foggy London town. They're in the process of realizing that they're being targeted, tracked down, murdered, and mutilated. Not a fun spot to be. Enter Frederick Aberline, the opium-dependent, psychic vision-prone police investigator. Using his unique viewpoint, he connects the crimes to the Freemasons, a powerful society with plenty of members in positions of influence. Thanks to this observation, Aberline is also put in the line of fire. You know, you can't just go around questioning the folks at top. They're there because they're better than the average person. So as Aberline attempts to bring the Freemason killer to justice, he's worked against by other Freemasons who'd rather not deal with the scandal. All of this culminates in plenty of blood and gore in the seedy London underbelly, and of course, a lobotomy. The insight into the legendary Ripper, as well as a fascinating portrayal of some of the darker aspects of life in late 19th century London, adds a whole lot to the horror and nastiness of this period piece. And finally, at number 1, we've got The Witch, a New England folktale. Seems like New England has a lot of horror associated with it, eh? Must be something in the water, or the trees. Maybe the goats have something to do with it. Either way, The Witch is a hauntingly beautiful tale of an exiled family's descent into madness and witchcraft. It's not often that folks dip into the 17th century for horror movie inspiration, so right out the gate you know The Witch is something special. A poor settler family is exiled from their colony for just being too damn devout. Who knew that was even possible, right? After adhering possibly too strictly to the word of the Lord, they're banished to the wilderness, where they're free to worship in any way they so choose. What starts out as extreme puritanical behavior quickly devolves into obsession and fixation, which of course inspires the youngins to behave badly. And that makes it very easy for the local Wiccans to sink their claws into the family's formative flesh. It's a slow burn, sure, but the attention to detail and the mundane ins and outs of a reclusive family's life in the age of colonies is fascinating to watch play out. It's equal parts beautiful and brutal, with cinematography that manages to paint the wilderness as both freeing and oppressive. The old-timey accents and patterns of speech add to the overall effect too, at times charming, but often difficult to parse, making the viewer feel like an outsider too. And of course, it's scary as hell. The way the witch manages to ooze into the family's life bit by bit builds a constant sense of tension and dread over time. And the payoff, while not as explosive and bloody as some horror movies, is well worth it. You can stop trying to build a time machine. The past is scary enough without having to experience it firsthand. Why not just watch some top-notch scary historical movies instead? It's usually more glamorous and with a much better survival rate for you.